In response to the success of the Superman movie, a new film would be created. We would be introduced to a football star who finds himself on another planet to save our puny souls. So today, let's remember Flash! Savior of the universe! Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Retro Renaissance, you beautiful people. Before we dive into the 1980s masterpiece, let's take a quick look at the history of Flash Gordon. And before we do that, I have some beef with the internet. Let's say I want some sweet Flash Gordon merch. So when I search Flash Gordon t-shirt, for example, you get these. And when I research Flash Gordon, this can come up. To be clear, the Flash is not Flash Gordon. Anyway, Flash Gordon all started back in 1934 with the success of the Buck Rogers comic. King Features Syndicate decided to create its own science fiction comic strip to compete with it. When coming up with the idea, they were inspired by the 1933 novel When Worlds Collide.
Racing through space toward an inevitable collision with this planet.
Nothing is going to happen.
When worlds collide, you'll see the most amazing, awe-inspiring scenes ever put on film. The forces of nature unleashed in all their terrifying force. Tremendous tidal waves smashing New York City.
The themes of an approaching planet threatening Earth, and the athletic hero, his girlfriend, and a scientist traveling to a new planet by rocket were adapted by Alex Raymond, the creator of Flash Gordon. The initial storyline Raymond introduced were dismissed for not containing enough action sequences. Raymond reworked the story and sent it back. They liked it, and Raymond's first Flash Gordon story appeared in January 1934 alongside Jungle Jim. The Flash Gordon strip was well received by newspaper readers, becoming one of the most popular American comic strips of the 1930s. The comic strip follows the adventures of Flash Gordon, who was a handsome polo player and a Yale University graduate, and his companions Dale Arden and Dr. Hans Zarkov. The story begins with Earth being threatened by a collision with the planet Mongo. Dr. Zarkov invents a rocket ship to fly into space in an attempt to stop the disaster. Half mad, he kidnaps Flash and Dale, landing on the planet and halting the collision. They come into conflict with Ming the Merciless, Mongo's evil ruler. And that's the basic subtext of the Flash Gordon story. The imagery and context of Flash and Ming would prove to be problematic, but more on that in a little bit. After the huge success of the comic, Flash Gordon was featured in 3 serial films starring Buster Crabbe.
Vanish you to the clay caves.
They would be the titles Flash Gordon in 1936, Flash Gordon's Trip to Mars in 1938, and Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe in 1940. The first Flash Gordon serial remains copyrighted, but the compilation made of the second serial and the third serial itself are in public domain. I have went ahead and added one to the channel. There's a link in the description if you're keen to do so. Then, in 1980s, with an all-star cast, soundtrack by legendary rock band Queen,
because they were saying to us at the time, well, obviously the scoring will have to be done by the orchestra guy. You know, that's what movies are. They have to have orchestra underscores. And I was thinking, no, perhaps they don't. You know, if we could actually do this in a kind of rock style, it could really break some barriers down.
What could go wrong? Well, first we need to acknowledge the problematic tone mentioned earlier. Back in the 80s, we were, let's say, more ignorant and less sensitive. Recently, the movie has undergone some backlash because of its appropriation and racial undertones. An article by TheGuardian.com states it's not hard to pinpoint the mindset that inspired the creation of Flash Gordon's extraterrestrial nemesis, Ming the Merciless, back in 1934. Back then, the scariest thing you could imagine invading Earth is a gentleman of apparent East Asian extraction. It's clear you're not really frightened of aliens at all. Ming, along with Fu Manchu, and later the Mandarin comic book supervillain, are classic examples of yellow peril xenophobia. That was at its height at the time, and I'll go ahead and toss a link to the full article in the description. Now let's talk about the reception of the film. It did not make a big splash at the box office. Maybe it was because it was too campy or silly. Maybe it's because of the trouble on the set, which we will get to.
You can't beat the human spirit!
But it had a budget of $20 million, more than The Empire Strikes Back, which was released earlier that year. It took in only $27 million at the box office. So while it made a profit, it was not the juggernaut Universal had hoped for. The end of the film leads us to believe that there may be a sequel. Due to the reception and other factors, there was not. The sets and the salaries of the cast drove up the cost. And using green screen and special effects were also very costly. Because of this, it made it difficult to manage a profit, and it is said that the senior designer of the film did many Fellini movies, a tone which was carried out in the film. And if you care what critics think, it currently has an 83% at Rotten Tomatoes and is certified fresh. All that being said, as a kid, you just watched movies. Good or bad, if a movie was on, that's just what you did. For me, I first saw Flash Gordon on HBO. Yes, our main TV had HBO because we were fancy like that. This movie filled me with all the joy a superhero-loving kid could imagine.
Ming's not unbeatable. With all his men, he couldn't even kill Flash.
Gordon's alive.
And this football scene is what let me know that I was in for a fun ride.
Yeah. Are your men on the right pills? Maybe you should execute that trainer.
So now let's talk about the cast. Well, some of them. Sam J. Jones was born August 12, 1954. After high school in 1972, Jones enlisted in the United States Marine Corps, where he played American football. With service in the Marines completed, he moved to Seattle seeking to join the Seahawks, but was rejected. Instead, in 1976, he played for their practice team, the Flyers, as a semi-professional. Sam married Lynn Eriks in 1982. They had 2 children and divorced in 1987. Sam would go on record saying he wasn't the greatest husband to Lynn. Following the divorce, he married Myrtle Blervac, a French actress he met while filming on the island of Mauritius. They were married in Nevada on August 15, 1987, and divorced 3 years later. He then married Ramona Lynn Jones on June 26, 1992, and they have 3 children. And he would be our Flash Gordon. It is said that on the set, Sam J. Jones had disagreements with the director and producer of the film, Hodges, and producer De Laurentiis, and departed prior to post-production, which resulted in about half of his dialogue being dubbed by a professional voice actor, whose identity today is still a mystery.
He's a Canadian actor. I do know his name, I can't remember it, not because for any reason, but I just simply can't remember his name. He did sort of things like Thunderbird, one of those Thunderbird characters.
Looking back, Sam feels he was naive in the handling of the situation that led to the cult classic's biggest mystery to this day. However, in an interview since, Flash Gordon Star claimed it wasn't as severe as some may have thought. Speaking with Maxim in 2012, he said, "I didn't have a falling out with the director, but producer Dino De Laurentiis, and I bumped heads a few times. There were a few misunderstandings, and being naive at the age of 25, I just let the attorneys handle everything. I just let my representation handle it, and they did not do a very good job at all. The bottom line is they worked for me, and I take responsibility for what happened. I didn't go back for looping and dubbing, so they ended up using another actor to loop. I think about half the film was actually not my voice," he says.
A couple of times, I think I got to tears, just being frustrated because, he was so specific and demanding about how he wanted his film to look like.
When Dino came on the set, people got so scared no work got done. He used to come on with 3 or 4 of his henchmen. They were carrying money in their pockets and things, and bags in black outfits. And Dino come. People were terrified when Dino was around. We get on like a house on fire, Dino. And I'm busy doing something. So, Dino, go off. We won't get anything done. Dino, you must. We can't get anything. Everyone's terrified of you. We can get bugger all done.
And I think he was a great Flash. While a different take on the Flash of the past, he was charismatic and brave. And he was also just a human. No superpowers here. And there would be some nods to Flash in the TV series, and with Sam in Ted and Ted 2. As mentioned, Sam admits to being a bad husband to his first wife, Lynn.
My first marriage to Lynn. Lynn's a great lady. We have 2 great children, Matthew and Kaylin. Lynn was a great wife and a great mother, and I was just a horrible husband. I was a habitual adulterer, you know. No fault of anybody but myself. You sit there, blame it on Hollywood, just blame it on Hollywood, what? It's just a matter of a man making wise decisions.
After Flash, Sam would have his ups and downs in the acting business and at some point just could not get roles. He was at a crossroads and he had a family. He thought, what do I do with this? How do I support my friends and family? He decided to get a job, not an acting job, a regular job. Since Sam was a former Marine, he used this to be security.
Average day is I get up at 3:30 a.m., cross-border security operations 101. We'll be under the radar today, low profile. We're crossing the border at any designated time between 5 and whatever it is, 5 a.m. on. You will not see our weapons. Our weapons are usually concealed. We're not in a combat zone. High risk, but not combat zone.
And on one tragic day, he took some sleeping pills, and his wife called his friend and then rushed over to save his life.
In between my two marriages, I was with a French model, and I was madly in love with this lady. And she left me for another man, and I was devastated. So I'm looking at two things on how to get her back. I'm looking at a handgun. Handgun. Well, that's, And I'm looking at a little bottle of Sominex, little pills you buy across the counter to make you go to sleep.
He took a bunch of sleeping pills, and then his wife at the time, who we had married from over there, called me on the phone and said, you're Sam's good friend, I think you should come up here, he's not right. So I went up to the house and the ambulance came and all that and they pumped his stomach. I went down to the psych ward that they had him in because he was probably a little nutty. I go in and so and then in these doors, and you go in there and I see him and he's like, oh brother, he's like half laughing and half crying. I just grabbed him by his shirt. And I just got up in his face. I said, stop it, or you're never getting out of here.
Kind of an alcoholic. Childhood was unpredictable, unbalanced, dysfunctional. Yeah. Dad was on the road a lot. He was a former military. So a lot of my raising, growing up was, hard knocks. My father left and went to the Wyoming coal mines. It probably arrived at the ripe old age of 14 and obviously started drinking, which led to 50 years of drinking.
A lot of actors come from a place of loss, and Sam experienced loss as a teenager in a horrific way.
Well, my older brother, the only brother I ever had, we were 14 months apart. Joe Jones. He was so great as an athlete that they nicknamed him Jumping Joe Jones. And he was a local hero. We were going from Florida to Sacramento. We thought it was a vacation, but little did we know that our dad was running from bill collectors. It was a deceptive move, caused a lot of contention and strife between my brother and my dad, and he was never the same from that. He got in a bad car wreck, but he was physically so strong that he survived. And he was 21 at this point. Because he was of age, he told the doctors not to tell the family that he only had 6 months to live because his organs were deteriorating inside. And he acquired a gun and he got pulled over by a cop and he got shot and killed by a police officer who was protecting himself, obviously. And that in itself is devastating. Yeah. But, as you can see, I haven't talked about this much. But it wasn't just so difficult that he left this world early, but the cop that took his life happened to be good friends with my mother. So, my mother's good friend shot and killed her oldest son. The weapon that he acquired, my dad bought for him.
Sam would find balance, and it was his faith that would save him in many ways. So Sam would continue acting in movies. Sam really goes all out with his fans, and that is one of the most amazing parts about him. So good job, Sam. You overcame the demons and found what's really important.
We had a small group of 4 or 5 couples. We had met maybe weekly for about 2 months, and we're just getting to know each other. Sam and his wife come late one night.
I remember my wife and I were arguing one day at the airport, and it was all about me, you know.
And we're sitting there talking about opening up our lives.
And she said, there's a great book.
And finally Sam stands up, bigger than life, and says, I need to tell the truth here. My life is a mess. We were arguing in the car. That's why we were late.
It's called Purpose-Driven Life. I said, I don't want to read it. I know my purpose in life. You know, I know my purpose in life, woman.
We need help, and we need this group.
She said, well, just read the first paragraph. So Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. I read the first sentence and the first 4 words. It's not about you.
And when he did that, because he was so real, it changed the entire chemistry of that group forever.
Some roles do define actors. Like Lou Ferrigno will always be the Incredible Hulk. Same can be said for Sam. He will always be Flash Gordon. However, like Mark Wahlberg said, I feel the same.
Were you a fan of Flash Gordon growing up?
Not so much Flash Gordon, but Sam Jones.
Melody Anderson would be our Dale Arden. Melody Anderson was born on December 3rd, 1955, and is a Canadian retired actress and social worker and public speaker. She's also been in other TV movies such as Marilyn and Bobby, Her Final Affair, and T.J. Hooker starring Captain Kirk. Like I said, although being mostly retired from acting, she said she would definitely be interested if they ever make a Ted 3. Instead of acting, Melody became licensed in California as a certified EMDR. Anderson is a licensed clinical social worker in the states of New York and California, with private practices in Manhattan and West Los Angeles. She also facilitates therapy groups at several treatment centers in the Los Angeles area. Anderson is an international lecturer, media spokesperson on addictions and the family. She has made presentations about substance abuse and other mental health related areas of study. So while not acting, Melody is doing just fine.
Z7, high voltage styling and a price that's a very pleasant shock. 2 magnificent 7s.
Baby, put a torch in your life.
Max von Sydow would be our Ming the Merciless. Max was born on April 10th, 1929 and passed away on March 8th, 2020. While Sam Jones and Melody Anderson would be fairly newcomers at the time, Max was already a well-renowned actor, starring in such films as The Exorcist in 1973.
Be silent!
And later in the James Bond adaptation Never Say Never Again in 1983, also in David Lynch's Dune in 1984, and Steven Spielberg's Minority Report in 2002, and Martin Scorsese's Shutter Island in 2010, and plenty more. His father, Carl Wilhelm Sydow, was an ethnologist and professor of folklorist at Lund University. His mother, Baroness Maria Margareta Rappe, was a school teacher. Von Sydow married actress Christina Inga Britta Olin in 1951. They had 2 sons, Klaas and Henrik, who appeared with him in the film Hawaii.
My feelings for you are of such a deep and tender nature, so profoundly affectionate that I dare not mention them.
But you have dared, and in doing so you have dishonored me.
The couple divorced in 1979. Von Sydow then married French documentarian Catherine Breillat in 1997 and adopted Breillat's 2 adult sons, Cedric and Yvon, from a previous marriage. Von Sydow relocated to Paris following his marriage to Breillat in 2002. In 2002, he became a citizen of France, at which time he had to relinquish his Swedish citizenship.
This will begin to make things right.
Von Sydow was reported to be either agnostic or atheist, and in 2012, he told Charlie Rose in an interview that Ingmar Bergman had told him he would contact him after death to show him that there was life after death. When Rose asked Von Sydow if he had heard from Bergman, he replied that he had, but chose not to elaborate further on the exact meaning of his statement.
We die and that's it. So, and he said, no. I promise you, you're wrong there. He said, you're wrong. No, I don't believe in that. You mean you will live somewhere after? You will go somewhere? Yes, he said. Well, I don't. Well, I'll show you. When I'm gone, I'll tell you. I'll show you. Okay. Well, I've heard from Bergman many times.
You have?
Well.
No, in spirit. You've heard from his spirit?
Yes, many times.
Tell me about it. I mean,
I can't.
Because it's personal? Because
well, it's, yes.
Are you worried about how people perceive it, or because it's too personal?
No. It's very complex and very, yes, of course, very personal. But yeah. Well, we understood each other, I think.
And the more that you worked together, the more you understood each other.
I think so.
In the same interview, he described himself as a doubter of his youth, but he stated his doubt was gone and indicated he came to agree with Bergman's belief in the afterlife. Von Sydow passed away on March 8, 2020 at his home in Provence, France at age 90. No cause was given, and he was survived by his wife and his 4 sons. And like I said, he would be our Ming the Merciless. He did it with such sincerity, and the cold heart of Ming could be felt in every action taken.
The traitor is close to confession, Your Majesty. Should we stop the torture?
No.
Father! Damn you, Father!
Max says he was a fan of the comics but never watched the show, and he had so much fun playing Ming. Other people we would see in Flash Gordon would be Richard O'Brien,
Your face not on sensation, like you're under sedation.
Topol, best known for Fiddler on the Roof,
A Fiddler on the Roof. Sounds crazy, no?
would be our Hans Zarkov and the mad scientist that kidnaps Dale and Flash. And Ornella Muti was the problematic love interest of Princess Aurora. She is also Ming the Merciless's daughter. She falls in love with Flash Gordon and risks her father's displeasure to protect him. She is jealous of Dale Arden and will resort to anything to defeat her rival for Flash's attention. So this makes us have a love, I guess it's a hexagon. It goes something like this. Ming wants to marry Dale, who's in love with Flash, who loves Dale. Princess Aurora loves Flash and Baron loves Aurora. Klytus wants to marry Aurora, likely not from love. And there you go, that should clear things up for you. And Timothy Dalton would be our Prince Baron. Prince Baron is the exiled ruler of Mongo, banished from his rightful place by Ming. His fierce opposition to Ming's rule is tempered by his growing love for Ming's daughter, Princess Aurora. As Flash Gordon was the inspiration for Luke Skywalker, Baron was also one of the inspirations for Han Solo. And Timothy Dalton, as we know, would later become James Bond 007. Brian Blessed would be our Hawkman Voltan. The Hawkmen were first introduced in the Flash Gordon comic strip, the second storyline called The Monsters of Mongo, making their first appearance in July 8, 1934. The Sky City where they live is used as a prison by Ming the Merciless, who sends Flash Gordon, Dale Arden, and Prince Baron there when he's forced by a sacred law to spare Flash's life. I loved his performance and it was very exuberant, and while they start out as foes, he turns out to be a hero.
I see. My thanks to you.
Yeah? What for?
Well, for giving a dumb old bird a second chance. Over the homing beam.
Finally, let's talk about Klytus, played by Peter Wingard. We never really see Peter as he's behind this mask the whole time. He would be Ming's right-hand man and wants power. He would suffer a not-so-great fate.
You tortured Aura. An interesting girl. I think she found it rather enjoyable.
Klytus.
Thanks to Flash and Baron. It is said Peter did not want his character to die in case there were a sequel. They even had an idea for the sequel. Peter says the idea of the sequel was that Klytus would find the lost city of Atlantis, where he'd rule far more ghastly kingdom than had been run by Ming. Unfortunately, that sequel never happened.
The point where Prince Baron and Flash Gordon killed Klytus and throw him on the spikes and kill him. And at that particular point, Peter Wingard wouldn't die. Suddenly, he stopped the whole filming. I think that Klytus is such an important character. There's going to be sequels. I think it'd be a big mistake to kill Klytus off. I don't think I should die. At which point I said, well, I'm not going to bloody die. Mike said, no, it's written in the script, you die now. Klytus is part of the whole thing. Well, I still, you die, you bloody die. You come on, they get hold of you, and they throw you on the spikes. and you die!
One thing I remember most about shooting the film, he says, was the weights of the costume. It was an absolute ton. We were provided these sort of ironing board things that we could lean on between takes. Another difficulty was not being able to see other characters. The mask was designed and made in Italy and cost around £5,000 to make at the time. There was also a white mask that looked like something that would have been worn in a pantomime. They decided to stick with the black one throughout the film. So the tale of the Flash Gordon movie may not be as simple as making a film. With a problem production, arguments, a tyrant of a producer, making and breaking careers, for me it was a ride I was happy to go on. This is the end of the video, so as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Flash! Don't move! Stay where you are!
Long live Flash! You've saved your Earth. Have a nice day. Yeah!